Okay, so let's start with defining the chimp model first before we get into the kind of nitty gritty of how we can apply it to our lives.
Okay, so in terms of the model itself, so it's based in neuroscience. So Professor Steve Peters created this model really through years and years, over 30 plus years of looking at the neuroscience of the mind and how the mind works. And there's a number of sort of areas in the brain that are particularly important to help understand the model. And again, so this is simplified down even further because obviously the mind's extremely complex. But I think it is really important to understand it from a neuroscience point of view. It helps people really understand where, if you like, the three teams, which we can explain in a minute, come from. So a couple of areas of the brain, and people don't need to remember the names of them, but the amygdala and the orbitofrontal cortex are particularly of interest, and those parts of the brain develop when someone's about 8 weeks into fetal life, so jelly baby size. And these parts of the brain we share with most mammals. So the sort of the role, if you like, of these parts of the brain are survival of self and survival of species. So these are what house our instincts such as fight, flight, freeze, drives, food drive, territory drive, sex drive, all things that are important for survival of self and survival of species. And the fibres within these areas are very, very fast acting. Okay. And we say, well, that makes complete sense because they're to do with survival. And their basis, if you like, is with an emotional basis. So, sort of what I feel about a situation or a person. And you can see how that then impacts, the instinct to fight, flight, or freeze. So these areas of the brain, when we look at them in terms of, ourselves, we tend to sort of the characteristics of these sides of the brains are things like, thinking catastrophically, seeing things in black and white, irrational thinking, paranoid thinking, all the things that you can say, if you're out there in the wild, in the jungle, you need to have, in order to survive, you need to be hypervigilant. So that's sort of one area of the brain, and that transfers into the chimp. So within our model, that is the chimp. The next area of the brain is quite a larger. It encompasses quite a few different sort of structures within the brain, and again develops at the same time as the sort of the chimp's circuits as well. So 8 weeks into fetal life. And this includes areas such as the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, the anterior cingulate gyrus. And these parts of the brain act like a massive storage system. So straight away, 8 weeks into fetal life, already things are being stored. So these areas of the brain store things such as memories, beliefs, automatic programs. So also an example of an automatic program would be, someone leaves their home address and arrives at their place of work without really remembering any of the journey, but it's been done safely. So these structures, we sort of term the computer within the model. So really acting like a storage system, like a computer, got a wealth of information there. But the wealth of information is there depending on what's been programmed over the years, how our chimp has interpreted, but also how our human has also interpreted, which I'll come on to as the third part. Okay, does that make sense?
Yeah, it definitely makes sense, yeah.
So the computer, so whereas we've said like the chimp circuits are very, very fast acting, the computer's even faster. So it's like a computer, so it's actually 4 times faster than the chimp. And then the final area is the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, which is an area sort of on the top of our head. And that tends to develop later in life, so sort of around about the age of 2 or 3. 2 or 3 years old. And so anyone who's got like young children or toddlers around them, you can see this change happen when this part of this sort of part of the brain starts to develop, because the child starts to ask all what I call like the W questions: where, what, when, why, how, all these different kind of questions. And that is if you like, the human circuits coming on board. So they're slower to develop, but this is what gives us our higher executive functioning. Okay, so things such as working with facts and evidence. So the basis is like in a logical basis, whereas the chimp, we sort of said, is looking at things from an emotional basis. So it's slower to come on board. It's always slower to, if you like, come into the conversation, but we can use this area of the brain to give us things such as solution finding, problem solving, using facts and evidence. So looking at things rationally, seeing things in shades of grey, working with probability. So very different, if you like, with a different agenda from the chimp. So when we look at the model, we say we've got 3 teams available to us at any one time: the chimp, the computer, and the human. And the only bit that we can, if you like, have control over is the human ourselves. That's who we are. Whereas the chimp and the computer, it's independent. That side of our brain, it's independent of us. And the key for what we're going to talk about today is it can think independently of us. It has a different agenda to what, if you like, the adult human has. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it definitely does. So is our aim to balance those 3 teams, or is it to know what team to use in certain situations? What should we be aiming for?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's to have an awareness that at any one time, any of us have these 3 teams available to us. And it's about, the skills are about understanding which team you're operating in that time. And is that the appropriate team? And if not, how you can move from what team you're in to the other team. But any of this is skills. So it takes a lot of time. And it takes, effort, not a huge amount of effort, but regularly small amounts of effort to really get the skills to understand that. So most people will sort of present to the world a mixture of all 3. But very commonly it will be chimp and computer that is presented to the world. And sometimes the only people who really know who you are is you, when you're at home behind closed doors. So a lot of times when we work with people to understand the model, it can be quite tricky for people to understand, well, who am I? Because I feel like I'm a whole mix. I can be so logical and rational, and then this emotional side takes over and sabotages what I'm wanting to do and all my good intentions. And that's really normal. And within the model and within chimp management, we say, well, that is normal. It is really unhelpful, but it is normal. You've got a chimp at the moment that's in the driving seat, and it is sabotaging your best laid plans, if you like. And that, again, when we go back to what we've just talked about with the neuroscience, the human is no match for the chimp. The chimp's 5 times faster and stronger, which is why when you can feel in that inner battle, that inner conflict, you think, well, I didn't want to do that, and I've done it again. I'm repeating the same patterns. Why? And then thinking, well, there must be something wrong with me. Other people seem to be able to do it. And then comes sort of like that, downward spiral of beating yourself up. And, so it can very commonly feel like in a conflict. So when I work with a client, I will map things out and they will go, okay, yeah, I see absolutely where the chimp is acting. And I see where I'm trying to come in, but the chimp is just overpowering me, backed up by some stuff that's in the computer.
It's quite interesting you're saying that the only part that we have control over is the human part. And I think you can definitely experience that when if it's the first time you're attempting mindfulness, for example, or meditation, the first few seconds you notice how little control you have over thoughts that are just coming into your brain at will. They just pop in. You cannot control them. And so it's amazing to think of all these behaviours that become so ingrained in us that we have completely no control over if we don't even have any control over the thoughts that pop into our heads.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, that is really part of what we do, is helping people separate themselves, the human, from what we call the machine. So we can think of the machine as the chimp and the computer. And we call it a machine because it's independent from us. We don't actually have the ability to control it. We can learn to manage it. But what we need to do is separate ourselves. And a lot of damage happens to sort of self-esteem, self-confidence, self-worth when we continue to muddle ourselves up with the machine, muddle ourselves up with the chimp. So a really important piece of work that we do with our clients is we say, okay, let's get to know who you are. Who is the human? And you can do that in a really simple way. And we always say, get yourself a fresh blank piece of paper and write down on there the ideal you. So in terms of qualities, values, behaviours, what is the ideal you? Or who do you want to be? You know, and write them down. And people can find it incredibly hard because you say, well, I want to write calm, but I know I'm not. And we're like, no, if you want to be calm, write that down. Because if we could, surgically remove the chimp, this is what you would be. This is the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. This is what you would be. So you are already that person. Anytime you're not, you're getting interference from the machine. So it's so important for, self-esteem, self-confidence, self-worth, self-image to know who you are. Because when life then comes and, throws you around as life does, if you can say, okay, my chimp reacted, but I know who I am, that is massive. That is so stabilizing to then go, okay, now I need to go and put right where my chimp reacted. And maybe I need to apologize. Maybe I need to go back and have a look at why that happened. But where people really struggle is that they then are confusing themselves constantly with the chimp and the machine. And often our human and our chimp are on different ends of a spectrum, but we're not managing the chimp. Therefore, the chimp, if you like, takes over and has its way. The chimp only ever lives in the here and now, so the chimp doesn't consider consequences. I don't want anyone to get the wrong idea and think the chimp is the bad guy. We need to eliminate the chimp. The chimp's amazing. The chimp gives us so much positivity. It gives us energy, enthusiasm, fun, so many positive things. But the problem is it's not, if you like, made to live in society. And that's where the problem can happen. And that's where sort of the inner battles begin. And don't battle a chimp because you're not going to win. It's just going to overpower you. So yeah, it's separating yourself from the chimp. Understanding the chimp's language it's going to come from an emotional basis. So understanding what's that emotion, that's how it's trying to communicate with you. Our job as a human is to try and listen to the message from the chimp and then say, okay, what's the plan from here? Because sometimes the chimp is far faster than we are, so can see things, but it sort of works through the emotion. So our job is to kind of listen to the message and say, is there something in that? Do I need to make a plan in a human way? Otherwise, the chimp's just going to react and keep sort of, if you like, in the background, kind of bubbling away. So it's not that the chimp's necessarily wrong. It's often that we don't understand how to interpret how it's trying to communicate with us.
Is the most common problem you see that people are letting the chimp win more often than not, or is it the computer that often wins?
So again, there's different layers to it. So everyone's chimp is different. So we're all unique. Okay, so we're all unique, and our chimps are all very, very different. So often it's working with the patient the client to understand the nature of your chimp. So the nature of your chimp is important in itself. Then we've got to look as well at the computer, because what beliefs have been put down there, laid down there by the chimp and the human over the span of someone's life that, if you like, is therefore prodding the chimp to react. So, different beliefs that you can get. So, for example, I don't know, I'm not good enough, right? I'm not good enough. That can come from any number of different situations a person finds themselves in. And again, I think the key, remembering uniqueness is so important. Uniqueness is so important because we are all unique. Is you can have two people in the same situation, but interpret that in a totally different way. But the way they interpret it, that gets laid down in the computer. So throughout kind of childhood, teens, adulthood, that we can all be in different situations that can make us feel I'm not good enough. But if that then gets laid down in the computer of I'm not good enough, when you're then in different situations and perhaps there's a criticism or feedback that is interpreted as slightly negative, the chimp will look in the computer for guidance. And if that comes back as, well, you're not good enough, you're not as good as other people, bump, that goes straight to the chimp. And you can just imagine any number of emotions that can come. Equally, if you've got in the computer the opposite of that, which is you're better than other people, that's not helpful either for living in like the society. That comes back and gives the chimp a whole host of other different emotions and reactions and behaviours. So a lot of work that we do with people is helping them manage the chimp through different strategies, and a lot of work is looking at what's in the computer that's unhelpful to that person, that's causing, you know, the chimp to react and therefore behave in a way that effectively sabotages how they want to be.
I mean, it puts me in mind of something Gabor Mate says about addiction, and it probably applies here, where he always advocates don't ask why the addiction, ask why the pain. And then this could be applied here to the chimp, in that what's the chimp wanting when you compulsively, I don't know, behave in a certain way, scrolling social media or something like that, and then you find an hour goes past, and then you end up beating yourself up about it. The better question isn't why did I do that? Is why was I feeling pain before? What was I trying to avoid? What was the chimp needing in that moment or what was I needing in that moment that I didn't give myself?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, if we look at the chimp wants immediate gratification and wants to avoid pain. Okay, so that's where the chimp is. And the chimp also wants to know, what's in it for me? If you're going to try and change something, what's in it for me? But I think if you start to understand, well, that I can say to clients, like, the chimp can be very childlike, and that helps them understand working with their chimp. So immediate gratification and avoidance of pain. So then if we say something like scrolling or, so use of social media when you don't want to, and that sort of onward scrolling, I would say, again, obviously my background is in medicine. So as a doctor, I would say that to me is a symptom of something underlying. So if we took a symptom, so for example, like, I don't know, so take a cough. Okay, so a cough is a symptom. It's not just a symptom of one condition. There can be so many different things that cause cough. It can be a virus. It can be a bacterial infection. It can be asthma. It can be acid reflux. It can just even be a habitual cough. So, and there's a whole load of other things. So straight away, just from one symptom, we've got 5+ different potential diagnoses, underlying causes. So with something like, if someone's struggling with managing their screen time, we say that appears to be a symptom. What's the underlying reason why that then is occurring? So, there can be so many different reasons. So, boredom. And soon it becomes a habit. Habits very quickly form. It can be, an unhealthy coping mechanism for something that's actually really difficult for that person to deal with. Procrastination. The list can just go on and on. Even things such as, not having a well-managed troop drive. So the chimp has lots of different drives, and they're there to, if you like, effectively help the chimp stay safe. So a troop drive is an important drive for a chimp, because lone chimps in the jungle don't do well. But again, trying to find your troop, so that group of people, whether it's just friends, just family, or family and friends that get you and have got your back, that can be really difficult for people. And again, people can then look to social media thinking, right, I'll get my approval or likes or credibility or whatever from there. And then that can become a habit, even though it becomes quite a destructive habit, because then every like or dislike has a huge impact. And the chimp's needing more and more gratification, looking for approval, basing its self-image, self-worth, self-esteem and self-confidence externally, which, that is so destabilizing. But commonly happens, the chimp always looks externally to compare, and again, with social media, that can be really, really difficult and very destabilizing for someone.
And so if we take this as a kind of case study, let's say it's someone that finds himself scrolling social media, they maybe get lost in it, it's a very unconscious habit that they've built where an hour goes past and they don't know where the hour went and they didn't even want to do that or didn't feel like they wanted to do that. Is step one awareness? Is it becoming aware of the problem first?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I think there's so many, it's like an onion. There's so many different layers to this that it could be. If I was working with someone and they presented as that was sort of, something they were struggling with, which commonly happens, again, my first step would be help them understand the model, where it comes from. So, that's a really important point, is to understand, these three teams and to sort of say, what does this mean to you? Because again, different people will have different interpretations and say, well, I can recognize, my chimp there. Absolutely. This is what it's doing. So really it's working through it in a sort of a step by step with the client. So saying, okay, so this is the symptom, is this sort of scrolling, and then sort of saying, okay, so what does that mean to you when you do that? So again, that's going to be different for different people. So it could be, I've lost an hour, I've not been present for when the children have been at home, I've gone on it and it's made me feel really sad, it's affected my self-esteem. So again, I need to look at it in terms of what effects that is having on that person, because again, that's going to be different for everybody. And then it's again understanding, if we can, where it's come from. Why did it start? Because what we've clearly got is a habit. So a lot of things that people are struggling with is habits. So again, if we come from the chimp's point of view, wants immediate gratification and avoidance of pain, something like the social media and the scrolling absolutely buys into that. Yeah, so the chimp wants immediate gratification, and the thing with sort of the scrolling is that those sort of the shorts, particularly, the chimp can all very quickly get that immediate gratification. Yeah, so your chimp's 5 times faster and stronger. So understanding this is why it's so hard, because it's feeding the chimp, and the chimp go, yeah, more. It's no different, if you like, from the eating drive in a way. So people who struggle to manage their eating habit, one of the things that when I work with people that are struggling with that is explaining, well, it's food, food's a drive. It's not something that you've actually got a lot of control over. Hormones are released to make you feel uncomfortable when you are hungry, to go and seek out food. When you eat, there are different hormones released to make you feel good. So that's why the food drive's really hard to manage. So understanding, first of all, that we've got a situation is hard to manage because we've got a habit. So there's a habit forming in the computer, a computer program, as well as feeding the chimp with, this is going to give you immediate gratification. Yeah.
I think also just the modern world is so overrun with instantly dopaminergic stimuli. So junk food being one, social media, pornography, online gambling, all these things that just weren't available to us when hunter-gatherer times. And I just for someone, let's just say that for the case study, the person that's scrolling social media, maybe they've identified that it's an avoidance of pain situation. Maybe they do it when they feel bored. Maybe they feel like the world's, the reality is just a bit boring because it's not instantly dopaminergic. What's the next step for them? What is it, something practical next for them to do? Is it an exercise? Is it, I don't know, writing something down?
Yeah, so the recording went off slightly during that, so I picked up things, so it's fine. But I think, yeah, again, so what I would do with someone then is anyone, and again, we're going to use social media as an example, but anything that we talk about here, people can transfer to different, sort of habits or things that they're doing that aren't helpful. So if someone's presenting with something that they want to change, then one of the things you can look at is, the triangle of change. So the triangle of change is a really useful tool that I use with my patients in general practice and also in clinic management to help see and help a patient or a client see, can we change a behaviour that's unhelpful? So the triangle of change is, if you literally imagine a triangle, and then on one bit we've got psychological mindedness, which I'll explain in a minute. Then we've got on another corner, I don't know if you call triangles corners, on another one we've got reward or suffering, and then on the other side we've got motivation and commitment. So in order for someone to change a behaviour, all three areas need to be met. And so that really is psychological mindedness, is that the person recognises that the responsibility to change and manage their mind is with them. So I've had lots of people over the years, obviously a lot of my job is talking about changing unhealthy habits, so stopping smoking and things like that. If someone's saying, well, I'm not going to stop smoking until my partner stops smoking because I live with them, I think we're not going to move ground here. Yeah, because we're not. Then it's looking at the reward or suffering to change. So is the reward to change great enough, and or the suffering you're currently experiencing great enough to change? So you can do work on these as well to sort of sit down and say, well, what is the reward that I'm likely to get if I change the behaviour? What is the suffering with me continuing with this behaviour? And again, those can have work, because initially you might think, oh, no. But actually we'll sit down and really think about it, really think through those. And then motivation versus commitment. So motivation comes from the chimp. It's a feeling. Okay, motivation is great when we've got it, but we can't rely on it. But commitment is about saying, okay, commit to the plan. It doesn't matter what I feel like, but it's about committing to the plan. Okay. But again, even just that, it's about really taking some time to sit down and work out what that plan is. So we often talk about a human-led chimp-friendly plan. The chimp's faster and stronger than we are, so we have to keep the chimp in mind. So if we're coming up with a plan that the chimp doesn't agree with, then we're going to struggle to get that plan to be followed through. We really need to be thinking about, what do I need to make it work? What's going to stop it working? So what are the potential pitfalls? And it's really sitting down and making time to think about this. We've got to consider the chimp's character in all of this as well. So we've got to work with chimp rather than battle with it. Recognizing this is probably a habit now, the scrolling. And again, any habit's very difficult to change. It takes on average, I think, about 60 days to change a habit. Looking, is there perhaps a gremlin? So a gremlin is an unhelpful belief or behavior in the computer that is linked, this behavior, very commonly there is. That can then lead to self-image, for example, being affected. So how you see yourself. So, if there's a gremlin such as, I'm lazy or I'm disorganized, and someone has that self-image, say, well, why not do it? Because I'm lazy and I'm disorganized. So there's loads and loads of layers to it. And it is about working through that sort of, if you like, step by step and slowly. It is about coming up with a plan. The plan is really important, and checking that, the chimp's on board. So part of the plan is, what's essential to make the plan work. Perhaps you can have desirables as well to make it a bit more enjoyable along the way, but it's really having to sit down and go through it, step by step. It's not a quick fix. It's not a quick fix.
Yeah, I think also just like the action of having a plan, the action of being aware of the problem and not relying on motivation or willpower as your sole motivators, I guess, because like if you're only going to do a thing or not do a thing when you're motivated, it's not going to work. It's like exercising. When people maybe look at, I don't know, someone that's very healthy or fit and think, oh, it's easy for them if they're really motivated. But it's like, if they only worked out when they were motivated, they'd never work out, essentially. And it's the same thing here.
Absolutely. And motivation's great when it's there. Go with it. It's absolutely, but we just can't rely on it. And that's why, again, it's about making a plan and then committing to the plan and saying, that's the plan. It doesn't matter how I feel. So again, what people can start out with is, I'm going to do this. I'm going to make this change. I'm going to get fit, or I'm going to stop my screen time. I'll have loads of time. I'm going to feel great. And the chimp thinks, brilliant. Yeah, I'm going to feel great. This is brilliant. But after sort of, days or, a couple of weeks, that feeling disappears. And that's when the problem hits. So I've worked with people sort of, as I say, sort of struggled with managing their eating habits. And what they'll tend to find is it's like 3 weeks in, that's it, it's gone. Or it's the first time I do a long journey and I have to stop at a service station. So the people know what are the pitfalls, but they haven't planned for them. And that's so important as part of the planning is, well, what are the likely pitfalls? And wherefore, what is my plan for those pitfalls? So, again, different example, but working with patients that, are struggling with their weight and need to manage. So snacking, for example, is a common thing. Evening snacking. I've worked really hard all day. I'm tired. I'm going to sit in front of the telly and reward myself with some snacks. So again, we could all say, totally understand it. But actually, well, how do we manage it? Because the problem is that habits become the norm. So to just try and break the habit is really hard. So sometimes it's about, well, let's work with the habit. And instead of buying the healthy snacks, don't buy any unhealthy snacks. Buy in the healthy snacks. Let's do it in stages rather than just say, right, that's it, got to stop snacking. Right, well, let's bring in some healthier options to start with. Then let's actually say, do something different in an evening, because it completely then changes it. But again, all that depends on the person in front of you and what's going to work for them. So a lot of my work is, if you like, walking in someone's shoes with them to say, what's happening for you? Where do you want to get to? And how can we do that with understanding the nature of your chimp?
I think one of the things that's just very interesting, something you said reminded me of it, was not going into a period of change expecting it to either be easy or be quick. And I think if you look at anything that's like, say, worth your time doing, you usually seem to see some sort of reward early on, and then that sort of change or reward plateaus a bit, and then it will maybe be a long time or quite a lot of difficulty to then get to like the big kind of payoff. And I think the thing that comes to mind is, say, like losing weight. A lot of people, let's say, are overweight who then begin to eat healthy. They'll see a very quick change when they start doing it, but then it will plateau as your body kind of gets used to it. And then that's when people maybe, I don't know if you'd say relapse, but then go back to their old ways. And it's the same. What's another example? I mean, this podcast is a good example. So, like podcasting, you see a reward when you first start doing it because it's exciting and you've got the momentum. But then there's going to be a plateau, and this is where I'm at, this very long plateau point, because I know if you look at all the statistics for podcasts, it's always like very, very slow, and then suddenly after years it'll like pick up. And so it's the same with anything. You'll have the momentum to start with because it's exciting. You're starting something, you're making changes. But it's going to plateau and you need to be prepared for that. It's like being prepared for the pitfalls as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, again, there's so many different strategies that you can use through the model. But another example that you can use for sort of the example you gave with losing weight or with podcasts is sort of set out, well, this is where I am now. Where do I want to get to? What does that look like? But, you can kind of think of that as like being a bit of a flag on top of the mountain. But if you keep looking at where you want to get to, that's just demoralizing. And you've got to say, well, this is where I am. I know where now I want to get to. But now what are the stages? What are those kind of levels at each stage? So instead of keep looking up the mountain, it's the same when athletes get injured. Say, I want to be back to full fitness, but this is where I am. It's so demoralizing. The chimp just think, what's the point? I may as well just go and, give up. But if you can plan it and say, well, actually, the next stage is that's where I'm working to next. Right, now I've achieved that. Let me celebrate and reward that, because that's actually also really important as well. What's the next stage? So you're constantly just looking at that next stage. So you're, if you like, breaking it down, because otherwise it can feel completely overwhelming. And if you overwhelm the chimp, it's just going to, I can't cope. So sometimes it can feel, I often describe it as facing like a brick wall. And that is just too overwhelming for the chimp. Like, where do I start? Whereas if you say, well, actually just take one brick at a time. What's each brick? What's the brick I'm working on now? Where do I go to next? And you don't go further than that. It breaks it down for the chimp. And then, working with the chimp can then get on. I'm motivated for this because I now know, yes, this is doable. This is achievable. So breaking things down for the chimp is much more manageable. Otherwise, it's just overwhelming. And that's why often I say to the patients, okay, there is a habit, like the late night snacking, that's the habit. So let's work with that habit and do it in stages. First of all, let's make the snacks healthier. Let's look if we can do an alternative, especially now we're going into spring and summer, we're more likely to go, okay, let's go and do half an hour in the garden or something. Suddenly don't want a snack, I don't need one. So it's different strategies. I think I often say, when we're working with clients, we're effectively giving them a toolkit. And that toolkit allows you to use different tools for different problems at different times. So there's not ever one answer or a 5 steps to X, Y, or Z, because everybody's unique and different strategies are going to work at different times.
I think also people in this sort of behavior change fall prey to like all or nothing thinking. And so the person that's going to cut out junk food will think, I can never have junk food again. And it's like, no, that's not quite the solution. Or they'll think in terms of, they'll think that they'll maybe conflate instant gratification with just gratification in general. And so they'll never reward themselves or take pride in what they've done or acknowledge what they've done. And if you never acknowledge what you've done, I mean, what's the point? Otherwise, you're just constantly striving and you're never actually gratifying yourself. There needs to be some gratification.
Yeah, and again, that when people say that to me, like, I can't accept, well done or a thank you, then I'm thinking there's potentially something in the computer here that's causing this problem. Because, like you say, well, life is a bit of a roller coaster, and things will come and things will go. The good things will come and go, as will the bad things. We could, we've all got to a point in our lives where if we look back, we will see, highs and lows. And for some people, lows will have been longer, but that person has still come through those lows to get to where they are now. People will be experiencing lows right now, but it's to remember this will pass. And then when the good things come, I always think, what a shame to not be able to actually enjoy those or appreciate them. But if someone's got something in their computer that effectively is, well, you're not worthy, it's almost impossible for that person to accept I did well, because those computer programs are so super fast broadband, and they are so well insulated from so many years of perhaps being told you're not good enough or different traumatic experiences. It is almost impossible to accept that. And it can almost cause stress in itself. So with someone like that, again, I'd be thinking, okay, could be the nature of the chimp, could be that the person is not looking after themselves as well. That's such an important part of managing the chimp, is nurture the chimp, look after yourself, meet its basic needs, food, exercise, rest, fun. What we do for our pets is what we do for our kids. Often people don't take the time to do it for themselves. if you're not in a good place before you start out, the chimp is going to be roaring before you even pass go. So that is absolutely imperative, because if we are in a good place, we're much more able to deal with those sort of blips in the road. And then if there's a big bump, we've got the energy and capacity to deal with them. But this, what can be in the computer absolutely can prod the chimp. And again, that's different for everybody.
I think also people tend to really beat themselves up if they don't feel good, or they feel depressed, or they feel upset or something like that. And they'll look at other people and they'll think, why do I feel depressed? Like, why do I have to feel this way? Everyone else, no one else seems to feel this way. And I always like, one of the kind of phrases that I find relief in, and if I'm ever going through something difficult, is like, it's supposed to feel this way. Like, if I'm going through something difficult, I'm going through something difficult. Of course, I'm going to find it difficult.
Yeah.
And I think it's just a useful thing. It's just acknowledging what you can and can't control. And if you don't feel good, that could be because of things out with your control. And anyone else would feel the same way in your exact situation. So it's just a bit of relief in that. It's just like, oh, okay, I'm supposed to feel like this. So I can still act to change it, but acknowledge that I'm supposed to feel this way as well.
Yeah, and it is really hard, because again, if we remember that the chimp avoids pain, it can't cope with like emotional pain. And it's very unpleasant when someone's dealing with emotional pain. It can bring in lots of feelings of isolation, and that you're just in free fall. So like loss of control, these are all things that, if you like, cause the chimp to just feel completely wobbled and thrown about, and it can feel like everything's in free fall. So again, different strategies of even just sitting with the emotion and naming the emotion. So often we can feel an emotion, we think it's anger. It's not always anger, that's the immediate one, but actually naming it and saying, actually, it's disappointment, or it's frustration, or it's a feeling of injustice. Naming it can help, and you go, okay, that's what I'm dealing with. And then needing to kind of, one of the strategies that can help is exercise the chimp. So let the chimp get the emotions out. Really, what often people tend to do is sort of push those emotions away. I can't deal with that right now, it's too painful, or I've got to get on. Where by just almost pushing it down, it's like pushing a lid on a bin that's overflowing. It's going to seep out somewhere. Whereas we actually say, no, bring it out, to a trusted friend, let them know I need to let this out. I might not necessarily agree with what I'm going to say, but until we do that, the blood supply stays with that amygdala and orbitofrontal cortex just going round and round. So if we can get it out into the air or down on paper, some people say, I don't want to speak it to other people, record it on your phone and press delete. But actually that act of expression is so, so important. The chimp doesn't want it fixed, which is a strange thing to sort of get your head around, but it just wants to be heard and understood. So actually, if we have a friend in distress, just say, tell me. We don't interrupt them. And people will often say, I feel better. And then what can happen for neuroscientifically is then the human, the computer can see what's going on. And you can actually then start to go, okay, well, actually I can come up with a plan. But we can't do that when I often describe it to my patients as running mental marathons. And I had a patient last week went, that makes so much sense, that mental marathon. I'm doing that all the time. Go round and round and round. And it's absolutely exhausting. It drains your battery, which means your chimp's already more irritable because you as a human have like almost knocked out of the picture. So actually by saying, right, let's express it, okay, and then we can come up with a plan and say, well, what is within my control? What isn't within my control? And therefore, what's the plan now? But people can find that very difficult because, again, it's like, but this is, again, I think where the model really helps, because it helps to explain, well, actually, if we exercise a chimp, we're going to move the blood supply away from that area. So we're, if you like, taking the power away from the chimp, but we're managing it. We're managing that chimp so we can work with it rather than at the moment battling against these horrible emotions that are just draining us physically and mentally. So again, those are different strategies to use that can be really helpful.
Yeah, I think naming it's just something that's just so useful. My partner's stepmom works in clinical. She does kind of clinical leadership stuff, but that's one of her slogans is naming it. So in workplace environments, if there's ever a problem or you're struggling with something, name it, get it out in the open, get it out of your head. And I think it's incredibly useful, and especially like even if you don't want to say it to another person, writing it down or, like you said, recording it is incredibly useful. Because if you're anything like me, and I mean, I'm pretty sure I have ADHD, so maybe you're not like me, but whenever I try to do some sort of mindfulness or meditation, trying to make sense of the thoughts that are coming in, like they're constant. And so
Yes.
trying to understand that without writing it down or getting it out of your head, it's impossible. You need to get it out, and you'll be able to clarify what's actually going on in there, because it'll be all over the place, going back and forth.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's where, that mental marathon, it you don't get anywhere. It's like a bit like, on being on a rocking horse. You don't ever you don't get getting anywhere with it. Whereas as soon as you get it out and you literally you allow your mind to then see what's going on. I think people also worry of, God, if I start, I won't stop. You will. I've been a GP for 20 odd years, and when I have a patient or a relative that's distressed, my job is to just listen, say nothing, and just listen and allow them to express everything, so I can really understand where they're coming from, what's going on. Because if I sort of interrupt, that's just going to make it worse. But 3, 4, 5 minutes, it's done. People can't go on longer than that if you really allow them just to get everything out. But what they can then feel is, right, now we've got a chance now to come up with some, if you like, statements or answers to box the chimp, all right? To then sort of say, right, well, here you go, this is what's going on. The chimp might come back with something else, and we need to go through the process again. But it is a very effective way when you're feeling that, emotions, feelings, behaviours you think, I don't want. So if we go back to what we spoke about earlier, if you have that, do I want to be thinking, feeling or behaving like that? And if the answer is no, the chances are we've got that interference from the machine. You're being hijacked away from that ideal person that you want to be. That's then to go, okay, I don't want to be feeling like this. What do I need to do? I need to let the chimp express, so I can start to understand where it's coming from. Often the chimp can come up with stuff that we go, okay, yeah, that is a point. I need to come up with a plan. Let me act in human mode. But sometimes the chimp will just keep coming back with stuff. You think, no, I'm not going to get engaged. That's just nonsense. I often say that's like the kids saying to me, can we have sweets for tea? No. No matter how many times you ask, it's going to be a no. Yeah. So we can choose not to engage with the chimp, but we do need to first of all go, what is it, chimp, that you're bothered about? Let me listen. Let me understand it. Right. Yeah. We don't need to worry about that. That's fine. I'm not going to not engage. Actually, there's a point there. What's the plan? So coming up with what's the plan, again, can really help settle down that kind of that feeling of, you're in free fall.
I think it's quite similar actually to children, in that if a child, I don't know, verbalizes a need or a want, instead of like shutting them down like instantly, helping them understand why they have that want or need is just very
Yeah.
helpful for helping them later in life acknowledge what it is they want and then actually make an informed decision about it, rather than just almost doing the same thing that their parents maybe did, is shutting them down as soon as they acknowledge a want or a desire.
Yeah. And again, children often really struggle to actually understand what it is. It's just something doesn't feel right. So unless we hear them out, we go, right, so is it this? Maybe it is. And it's the same for ourselves and for others. It's unless you express, you're just going to keep going round and round. And, what people, again, present with as a symptom isn't always actually what the problem is. I'll never forget my son when he was, I think he was about 3 or 4, and I asked him to put his socks on, and he refused to put his socks on. I was like, why not putting your socks on? Because you can put your socks on. We've got to that stage. And I had a 1-year-old at the time, And he had a meltdown about the socks. So we waited and we let the chimp settle and things. And I realised that it was because I was putting the socks on the baby. And what he just needed was, just to know, no, I still love you. I'm still here. But she's only 1, so she can't do socks. But you're a big boy now. You're 3. So it wasn't about the socks. It was about, am I still emotionally safe and stable? Absolutely. As soon as that, we never had an issue with socks again. So again, it's not always an obvious answer. That's why it's like what actually is the emotion. It's worth checking. Again, there's so many different emotions, and even just doing a quick Google of what are the different emotions can give people an emotion vocabulary that you think, I never even thought about all those different ones that it can be. And as soon as you do that, the chimp can go, yeah, that's what it is.
I mean, 2 things spring to mind there. One, that's a great slogan for anything any problem that you're having. It's never about the socks. You can always just kind of think it's never the surface level thing.
Yeah.
The other thing is it's just a recommendation. Oh, sorry. It's just a recommendation for what you're saying about like building your feeling vocabulary. One app that I found is called it's either How You Feel or How I Feel. It's free and it has a whole vocabulary of emotions helpfully categorized into like a 4-quadrant thing, and it's just very helpful. You can just scan it all if you've not got a very wide emotional vocabulary. It's very helpful.
Yeah, and again, that's something that we can help children with as well. Helping them expand their vocabulary. That's something I've done with my children, since they were small, to help them understand, different emotions. And they're pretty good now at going, right, actually, I'm really frustrated with my older brother because he's done this. I get that, But again, it's that's speaking the language of the chimp. So again, good ways to sort of start and start to help understand and manage chimp. I think another thing that's really common as well is expectations. We all carry, or our chimps carry, expectations of ourselves, others, and situations. So, just being mindful of the expectations that your chimp has set, and looking at them, and are they realistic? Are they reasonable? Because again, if the chimp is setting expectations that are so high that just are not achievable, what's the consequences potentially of that for you? Again, it's disappointment or self-doubt or further sort of beating yourself up because I didn't do it again, I didn't achieve. And again, like we've already said, the chimp looks externally and compares. So those examples you gave earlier, that why am I feeling like everyone else is having a great time? Well, that's the problem with things like the social media, is people show the great times. So therefore our chimps build into the computer everybody else is having an amazing time, therefore it's only me. So you can see how the chimps are quickly interpreting and laying down beliefs that then are going to prod the chimp repeatedly.
What's the most common practical strategy that you give out to people that come to see you?
Look after yourself, nurture yourself. So I often describe it as put the oxygen mask on you. So taking from the airline, if you don't put your oxygen mask on, you are not going to be able to help the people around you, that need you, that are dependent on you. And I think, I see it an awful lot, especially in general practice, where people are juggling so many things, especially I think in sort of that middle life section. So young kids, older parents who are maybe struggling with health, managing careers, houses, everything that comes with children, literally sort of reaching burnout. And yeah, if you don't put the oxygen mask on you and do those basics for you that you do for everyone else, you will not, it's not sustainable. It's not sustainable, and those bumps in the road become huge. And when something significant does happen, you just do not have the mental and physical capacity to deal with it. So it is hard, and it's hard, I think, it's sort of 24/7 living at the moment. So it is really, really hard. And I think a lot of people struggle to say no as well. So it's working with people to say, well, what's your belief around saying no, and what you think that means. So I think those things can often be tied together. But yeah, my number one is you've got to get yourself in a good place. Get yourself in a good place first. That's my number one.
Yeah, I think the problem we have with living so much of our lives online, especially with social media, shorts and reels and stuff like that, is that because it has to be so short, the content has to be very simple. And life never is that simple, but it ends up being a complete binary of you're either lazy and not doing anything, or you're constantly working and grinding in a sort of grind mentality. When the best way to be is somewhere in the middle, but that's not good content. That's not like sexy content. It's not binary.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's why I love podcasts more, is because they're long form and you can get more into the intricacies of these complexities. But the best way to be is like, obviously you want to work towards goals and you want to like aim upwards, but you also want to like gratify yourself and be proud of yourself and enjoy life as it is now.
Yeah, and it's when often people are struggling to go, well, I don't know what my purpose is. What should it be? I feel like I'm shaped by what society says it should be. And I think that's again another thing that people have struggled with for years. You go to university, then you get engaged, then you get married, then you have children. It's a constant thing, and I think even more so with things like social media, of how you should be, how you should look, how you should feel. It's huge, pressures and expectations. So it's not surprisingly people feel like completely wobbled. But again, that's because we're relying on the chimp, and relying on the chimp to look externally and compare. Whereas it's about coming back to who am I? Who am I as a person? That's your internal stability, and managing your chimp, doing internal recognition rather than comparing and going, well, I'm only okay if my boss has told me I've done great work this week. Well, actually, we can get that internally by saying, how did I do today in terms of, did I live by my values? Yeah, instead of did I achieve my list, but I behaved actually in a way that wasn't how I wanted to be. So again, that's how we build resilience in children, is say to children, well, how do you think you did? What did you do well? But in terms of what did you do well in terms of your effort and your concentration, not in terms of how did you do, I got an A. No, that's the outcome. Yeah, we want to know how you did in terms of those values-based things. That's what builds resilience in children. So they go, actually, I didn't do that well today. Why? Because I really didn't give my best effort. Okay, so if we had that time again, what would we do? And that's what I do with myself and my children, to go, okay, what could I do differently if I had that opportunity again? So you're re-putting down more helpful programs. But yeah, I think it is very much sort of externally driven, and that's causing a lot of, instability within ourselves and a lot of unhappiness. It's sort of, to be happy, you have to be proactive. You have to work on happiness. It's not necessarily just something that happens. It is something that you do have to work on.
So that's a nice way to kind of segue into our quickfire questions. So these are these are, I wouldn't say the favorite part of the podcast, but they're just a very interesting part of the podcast because I interview such a wide variety of people, you get some very interesting answers, because I'm obviously asking completely different questions throughout the podcast, given the guests, but these are going to be the same. And so it's very interesting to get some different perspectives. So let's start with, do you have a favourite book?
To have a favourite book? My favourite book is probably books that I've created, which are the photographs of all the children as they've grown up. So every year I've done a book of all the photographs from their year. So we've gone so my eldest is 12 now. So it takes about 2 days to do it online. And my chimp literally sits there and goes, this is going to be painful. But what I do is I take it beyond that to the finished product, and the kids love it, and they just get the books out and they're like, oh, do you remember this? Do you remember that? And so to me, those are my favourite books of the kind of the memories and the kind of the the joy we get. But God, you remember when that happened and this, that, and the other. So yeah, those are probably my favourite books. They keep telling me I've got to do the latest one. I'm like, I'll get around to it. Yeah, so that's my favourite book.
Yeah, I mean, two things come to mind there actually. One, my parents are just getting around to digitizing old camcorder footage from when I was young, and we've realized after, like, while we're watching it, is like they filmed everything on
Yeah,
these cameras, and so it's a lot of the boring stuff. So it's like, well, not boring stuff, but I mean like Christmases, like holidays, everyday stuff, birthdays, that we
yeah,
almost don't do it in the same way now that we have the phones in our pockets. The fact that we had like a
yeah,
big camcorder thing, it was like an event to get it out and to actually make the effort to do it. Whereas now it's kind of lost its meaning a bit, that you can just do it whenever you
yeah,
want. Um,
yeah.
and there's another thing I've done recently. That was the other thing that came to mind is I got to the end of last year and realized I could barely remember last year. I couldn't
Yeah,
remember what happened, and it was all just
yeah,
such a blur. And so I kind of
yeah,
I've made a concentrated effort now to journal everything I do. And there's a great app
yeah,
called Day One, no affiliation with it, but basically what I've got into the habit of doing is every day at the end of the day or the next day, I'll write down what happened yesterday. Even if it's boring, I went to work, I did this, and if I'd taken any photos, you can add the photos, you can add a location, and then you've got a whole map of all these different places you've added a journal to, and then you'll get notifications after a year saying, "Oh, this is where you were last year," and stuff like that. And so, yeah, I think that's such a good practice.
yeah. It is, and it's so silly. It's the kind of the most normal things that they find hilarious. When we are kind of like looking back over them, and it is just that ability to kind of connect. I think as a family where you go, oh God, do you remember when that happened? And then you said this, and you said, and everyone remembers different things. So I think it's really nice. As I say, it's an absolute pain to do, and my chimp has to prepare itself. But I've done it every year, and it's just great, when they're growing up to then look back and actually, like you say, look at all the different things that you did. That often this is again what the chimp will do is will just pass it off, and then you're moving on to the next thing. Whereas this sort of brings it back and gets you right back into the moment and those nice good feelings and things like that. So yeah.
Nice. Do you have a favorite quote?
Favorite quote is so life is tough, so find a path that makes it worthwhile. That to me I really like. I heard it on the radio quite a few years ago, and I remember it distinctly. I was driving over the Yorkshire Moors on the way to our annual chimp conference. It just came on the radio, and it was one of those moments where almost life stopped still, and I was like, oh yeah, because life is tough. So find a path that makes it worthwhile. And again, that can feel sometimes overwhelming to people where they say, oh, I don't know what my purpose is. But it's sometimes just about taking that moment to say, well, again, we come back to kind of what's your reason to be? What is it that you want? Where is it that you're wanting to get to? And actually sometimes chasing these social media likes and things like that, well, it's not going to make you happy, but what will? So it's looking back to the basics of life. So for me, just being a mum and being able to do the job that I do, that's it for me. I get to help people. That's what I've always, has always been within me, to help others. There's research about, the happiest people are those that volunteer for 100 hours a year. Anyone can volunteer to help, and what that gives back is massive. So that's a powerful one for me, because it acknowledges that life is tough. It acknowledges that's universal. I think, again, like that example you gave earlier, when people are struggling, you can feel like you're the only one. But it's recognising universality is that life's tough for everybody at different times. But that we can still find, fulfilment and purpose within that. Even in small ways every day.
I think there's a ruder version of that. I think it was like Jeremy Clarkson maybe said it is life's shit, but I'm loving it. And it's a similar vein.
Yeah, but what it helps do is as well gives you that reality and perspective. So we've got to remember the chimps don't have reality and perspective. The chimp thinks everything should be wonderful, everyone's having a great time, whereas the reality is life's bloody hard sometimes. And it's recognizing that's the starting point. So trying to go with the flow, it's hard, and sometimes life is really, really hard. And you know, when it's really hard for people, I encourage them to turn to your troop, because they're the people who've got your back. You know, the skills in your toolbox will feel empty, but your troop, they're the people that'll help you through the really, really tough times, you know, without a shadow of doubt. But that's the reality and perspective. And when the chimp loses sight of that, that's why then it can be really hard to manage as well.
What's the best purchase of £100 or less that you've ever bought?
Probably my 4 chickens. Nice. We've had chickens for a couple of years, so we've had different chickens depending on when the fox has arrived. But yeah, probably the chickens, because they're amazing. They're very relaxing to be around. I just love nothing more. One of my big nurture things is 5 minutes in the garden with a cup of coffee with the chickens and just hearing them, you know, scratching around, the little noises that they make. It's really relaxing, and obviously fresh eggs as well. I don't know, the kids just absolutely love going and get the eggs. But yeah, they're probably my best purchase because they give so much more than just eggs. They're brilliant. They're lots of fun.
Tell you, I've never had that answer before. What's the best advice you've ever received?
Oh, best advice. Get off the emotional roller coaster. So when life is tough, the emotional roller coaster makes it even harder. So get off the emotional roller coaster, because that will drain you. And that's really, really hard to do when life feels a real struggle. So again, different strategies to help you get off the emotional roller coaster.
And lastly, this question comes from the Actors Studio. If God exists, what do you want them to say when you get to the pearly gates?
You did your best.
Lovely. That's a lovely place to end. Sarah, thank you so much for taking the time. That was an amazing, amazing episode. There's so much value in that, and I hope everyone that watches or listens gets the same value that I've gotten from it. Obviously, people can buy the book Chimp Paradox. Where else can people go to learn more about it?
Yeah, so there's Chimp Paradox. There's also Steve's latest book, which is A Path Through the Jungle. So this is it's a really good meaty book. This will hold your hand step by step through all the different sort of layers of the onion that is the model. So our website as well, chimpmanagement.com. There's loads of free information on there, lots of different videos, links to our conferences and webinars that we do. We have an area on there called The Troop, where we do monthly videos. So again, people can get a lot of information. We also have a children's book, My Hidden Chimp, which is brilliant for children. My 12-year-old's just rereading it at the moment as we head into the pre-teens. So My Hidden Chimp, again, sort of, you know, those children that can read it to themselves. Young children, mine started with it about age 3. You can get a lot out of that. And there's a manual that goes with that called the Silent Guides. That's like the parent or carer manual to go alongside that. So I guess it really depends on sort of where people are wanting to come at it from. So I think if they were going to just do one thing and purchase one book, this is the one I would definitely recommend. A Path Through the Jungle. There's a lot in there, lots of activity and exercises. And again, it talks through the neuroscience, which helps people understand where the different aspects and sort of bits that they're dealing with are coming from.
Brilliant. Well, I'll link all of that in the show notes. But again, Sarah, thank you so much for taking the time.
Well, you're welcome. You're welcome. I'd just say one last thing is to say to people there will be good days and there will be bad days. And this is a skill. So if you think this isn't going to plan, try again the next day, small amount of effort, and just keep chipping away. It's lifelong learning. So don't be disheartened and don't be overwhelmed. Literally a bit at a time,
Lovely. And cut.